Before I introduce Rabbi Bienefeld, tonight's speaker, I would like to say a few things. First of all, I want to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for giving us the opportunity to be properly masping my mother. As you all know, the Levaya was on Friday afternoon after Chatzos, and because of that, we were told that we were not permitted to make any haspedim at the funeral itself. So this is an opportunity for us to say a few appropriate words regarding my mother's life and her accomplishments. As most of you also probably know, I had the opportunity of spending a week with my mother before she passed away, and her passing was very sudden and appeared to be non-painful, and for that I'm grateful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well. I would like to thank Rabbi Bienefeld for coming out here to the Sticks to give this discussion tonight and to say some words of eulogy for my mother. My wife and I have had the privilege of davening in many young Israels since we were married. When I was in medical school, we davened at the Young Israel of Fifth Avenue in New York, and Rabbi Wogelanter was our mentor. In St. Louis, initially Rabbi Krauss was the rabbi when we lived there when I was doing my internship and residency. Then when we lived in Los Angeles, Rabbi Yaakov Krauss was our rabbi there. And then when we lived in St. Louis, after that, Rabbi Bienefeld became our Rav. Here in Eretz Yisrael, Rav Stein, of course, is the Morid Asher of the Shul, and we're privileged of having Rav Kook as the Morid Asher of the city. And of course, as most of you know, Rav Schechter is my Rabbi. So I'm very grateful for all the opportunities that we've had to have excellent mentors, and I'm sure that Rabbi Bienefeld's discussion tonight will be very enlightening and stimulating. I want to thank my children and grandchildren for being so supportive during these past few weeks. And of course, I want to thank my wife for also helping me set up this evening. As she will tell you if you ask her, I'm a real good procrastinator, and without her help, I'm sure this would not have taken place. So I want to thank her very much for making me do the right things in life. And I want to thank you all for coming. Rabbi Bienefeld, as I mentioned, was our rabbi in St. Louis, and my mother considered him to be her Rebbe Muvhak for some 35 years. He was not only the rabbi of the Young Israel in St. Louis, but he was also a Rebbe in the Epstein Hebrew Academy. Since making Aliyah, he's been a lecturer at the OU Center, and we had the privilege of having Rabbi Bienefeld being an aide at the wedding of our children, Sarah and David. So I would like to call on Rabbi Bienefeld without any further ado. Oh, just a couple of announcements. There are refreshments in the back if anybody didn't have a chance to eat supper or is hungry. There are drinks. There are bathrooms in the back here. If they're occupied, there are bathrooms one floor down as well.
If I can ask everyone to turn their cell phones off or put it on vibrate. Thanks, Herb, Bereshus Harabonim, and Cranton family, and many friends who've gathered here this evening to commemorate the Shloshim of Betty Kratman, Bela, Basia. I know there's some discussion, okay? Bas Moshe Binyamin. When I gave some thought, considerable thought as to how I would put this together, I asked myself, how would Herbie want me to do this? Now, Herbie was president of Young Israel when I was there, and when Herbie would get up and speak, he'd say, I have 3 points to make, or I have 2 points to make. And of course, when he did that, everyone listened, because after the first point, they were anticipating the next point and the next point. But it was so logical and so rational that whatever he said was compelling. It's very difficult to disagree with whatever he said, which is one of the reasons he was one of the best presidents the shul ever had. I'm sorry?
Somebody wants to make your microphone closer.
Oh, okay.
Count
okay. That's fine. So when Herb called and asked me to be maspid on this occasion of the Shloshim and give this shiur, commemorating this period of time since the patir of his beloved mother, I felt quite honored and privileged to do so. You see, Betty and I, as Herbie mentioned, knew each other for quite some time. And during that period, I learned to admire her greatly. She and her dear husband, Julius Zal, were my congregants at the shul in St. Louis for some 26 years. And there we became good friends. I would say close friends. I came to like them both very, very much. At shul, Betty was my loyal student and would rarely miss any of my classes. She had a keen and sharp intellect, and in her own quiet way was not shy about asking many penetrating and intriguing questions. So I guess Herbie learned it from. And when one of her questions stumped me, which happened not too infrequently, Betty was so apologetic to think that maybe her question might have made me feel a bit uncomfortable. She was so exquisitely sensitive to another person's feelings and was able almost instinctively to pick up on any emotional disturbance she detected. And then she responded quickly with genuine warmth and caring empathy. Betty just had a way of making people feel good and comfortable, warm and accepting. Of course, she was in shul every Shabbos and Yontif and was among the first to be present. Betty was a regular attendee at Rabbi Alan Green Zal's shiur, for those in St. Louis who knew Rabbi Green, which began an hour prior to the davening, so she was among the first to be there. And for that matter, she was always front and center when any guest Rav came to the shul to lecture, to give a shiur. Betty was simply fascinated by Torah knowledge in all of its expressions, thirsty for its refreshing insights, and she just couldn't get enough of its wisdom. But personally, probably my most memorable moments, for me at least, was when Betty would present me with some of her home-baked chocolate cookies. Now, as the popular cliche goes, they were to die for. I would skillfully bring them home, hide them in some corner, and furtively consume them when no one was looking. Store-bought cookies from the bakery, I would happily share with anybody, but not Betty's. For me, those cookies carried an unforgettable and endearing message as well. They made me feel like an extended member of the Crampman family. I don't know how many people she gave these cookies to. And Betty, I was some 1,000 miles or sometimes more from home, and Betty, my mother, away from home. And so, as I said, when I was asked to speak here this evening, I very much wanted to accept it. It would be the very least I can do to express my profound gratitude to this special and remarkable woman. I hope to have more to say about Betty later, but first to the shiur. My topic is the obligation to honor one's parents in death as in life. In the lingo of Chazal and the Gemara, the end of the first parak in Kiddushin, Mechabdo b'chayav u'mechabdo b'moso. The Shulchan Aruch took that statement, Shulchan Aruch in Yeridei and Reish Mem, took that statement of the Gemara and made it into a chiyuv, chayav adam, l'chabed oviv v'imo b'moso. So let's begin and try to understand what that obligation is. When the Gemara presents it, mechabdo b'chayav, mechabdo b'moso, it seems to be a davar pashut. The Gemara doesn't ask for a source. It sort of accepts it. But yet, when you think about it for a moment, it doesn't seem to be that obvious. The Reb Chaim Volozhin, as quoted in the Menucha v'Kedusha, makes the following statement, the obvious statement. Ki b'emes achar hamoves ein zechus v'ein chova. So why should there be an obligation to begin with? The person, as beloved as they were in life, they're no longer alive. So therefore, what is this obligation rooted in that we're obligated to honor a parent in death as in life? The Chassam Sofer and the Meshech Chochmah as well in Chumash, when the Aseres HaDibros are mentioned in Vo'ez Chanan, Kabedes Avicha v'Yesimecha kasher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha, so the Meshech Chochmah asks, why was it necessary to say kasher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha? And the Meshech Chochmah comes up with this beautiful insight, and he says, in the Midbar, did the parents have to provide anything for the children? Nothing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu took care of all the needs of everyone. And yet, kasher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha. Children were obligated to honor parents, even if the parents didn't do anything, didn't have to do anything for them. This is the Meshech Chochmah. The Ksav Sofer takes that one step further and says, from here, we can see that in death, parents also can't do anything for their children, and yet we're obligated to honor them as well. The Mei Shiluach quotes the Gemara also at the end of the first parak in Kedushin. We have all the sugyas dealing with kibbut av v'em. He quotes the Gemara there at the end of Kedushin that a certain Rav Avimai, his parent was sleeping, and he wanted to give his parent a glass of water, and he held the glass of water for who knows how long while his parent was sleeping. And again, the Mei Shiluach makes the same comment. The parent didn't do anything. Why was it necessary for the child to stand there with the glass of water? Clearly, the conclusion that he draws is that just like in life, even in death when parents can't do anything, there is an obligation to honor them. But beyond this drush, which is certainly important, how are we to understand this? How are we to understand this chiyuv? So this is discussed by the Achronim, in particular the Maharam Shik, Rav Yosef Engel, has a discussion about this. And they make the following rather fascinating distinction. They say, if the mitzvah of kibbut av v'em was a mitzvah bein adam lechavero, if that's all it was, well then, once the chavero is gone, once the parent is dead, the obligation should naturally dissipate, no longer should exist. But he says, really, we know that's not true, because the mitzvah, the dibra of Kabedes Avicha v'Yesimecha is mentioned among the first five dibros, which of course are generally designated as mitzvahs bein adam lamakom, and so they claim, and they say that if the obligation to honor one's parents is bein adam lamakom, so then even if the parent is no longer alive, but to the extent that we honor the parent in death, we are, in effect, honoring HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well. In other words, when we remember a departed parent, we're remembering Hashem's part in our bria, in our creation, and that only intensifies our connection and our obligation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But perhaps we can go a little bit deeper in understanding into what this obligation is rooted in. Let me read to you the Sefer HaChinuch, well-known Sefer HaChinuch on the mitzvah of Kabedes Avicha v'Yesimecha. The Sefer HaChinuch says in part, Mishar she mitzvah zu, sheroi lo la'adam sheyakir v'yigmol chesed l'misha asa imo tova. V'sheyiten elibo ki ha'ov v'ha'eim heim sibas heyos ba'olam. V'al kein be'emes roi lo lasos lehem kol ha'kovod v'chol to'ele sheyuchal. In other words, without having to translate each word, the Sefer HaChinuch sees the obligation to honor one's parents in the mitzvah of Hakaras HaTov. To whom do we owe more than our parents? The Rav Soloveitchik Zatzal used to comment, he's fond of quoting the Gemara in the third parak in Moed Katan, Rashi and Tosfos there, that says, how come For all other relatives, other than Ava V'Imo, we mourn for 30 days, but for Ava V'Imo, it's a year. What is it rooted in? Could it be rooted in the emotional trauma of losing somebody? So the Rav said no, because Lo Aleinu, if God forbid a spouse passes away, a child passes away, the emotional trauma certainly has to be significantly more intense than, let's say, a parent who lived to 100 years old. No one can live forever. So the Rav says the Avelus is not predicated on one's emotional turmoil that a mourner feels in the wake of a death. Rather, it's based upon Hakaras Hatov. And there is no one to whom we owe more Hakaras Hatov than a mother and a father. So, how do we display this Hakaras Hatov to our parents? How do we demonstrate it? And it's this that I'd like to dwell upon. I'd like to unpack this idea of how do we demonstrate Hakaras Hatov to parents who are no longer alive. The Gemara in Kedushin explains very clearly what does it mean what does Kibud Ova mean, what is Mora of, the Gemara at the end of Kedushin Lamed Aleph. Okay, we're all familiar with the distinction between the two, but in death, they're no longer here. How do we display this type of Kibud Ova? So the answer, as has been suggested, is based on a Gemara in Sanhedrin at the end, in Achelek, where the Gemara has the following Kuruk. Bra mizake abba. Bra mizake abba. That, and here, generically, the Gemara uses the example of a son and a father, but it can be a daughter and a mother, and a son and a mother. So we'll follow the gender that the Gemara uses, but please understand that since we're talking about a mother here, that it certainly applies to a mother as well. Bra mizake abba. A son brings benefit, merit, helps to redeem the father. This is the supreme gesture of Hakaras Hatov. What can a child do to a parent when the parent is no longer here? How are they mizake them? How do they bring merit to them? How do they benefit them? So let's begin with number one, Herbie. Okay, number one. Okay. So let's make a distinction between being mizake them bidvarim and being mizake them b'maisim. And I think that's a fair distinction. It's my own distinction, but I think it sort of makes it easier to understand if we can categorize the deeds of a child to a parent this way. How do we demonstrate this type of kivara b'moso bidvarim? So the first is attribution. What do I mean by attribution? The Gemara itself comments and says, b'moso ketzad, hoya omer dover shmua mipiv, lo yomar kach v'kach omer abba. If you're saying over something in the name of a parent, you don't just say, this is what my father said. Ela rak omar, ela kach omar, abba mori hareini kaporas mishkavo. We add that hareini kaporas mishkavo. The Ramah in Yoredeya says we just do that for the first year. But that's what we do. And then Rashi comments right there, and Rashi says, what does it mean? Hareini kaporas mishkavo. Rashi says, Olai yovo kol ra horoi lavo al nafsho. What in the world does that mean? That anything bad that's to happen to their neshama, let it happen to me. So the Sefer Hasidim gives the following pshat. Sheha'or v'habein guf echad. The parent and the child are one body, they're one entity. V'din sheyitztaru habonim. Let the child take something upon himself, something small, to in some way alleviate, whatever it means, that the neshama during the first year, when every neshama, except with, as the Gemara tells us, some rare exceptions, every neshama goes through a period of din v'cheshbon. So let the child take a little bit of that away. Achronim point out this is one of the many reasons why people have a minhag to fast on a yurtzeit. Not that it's an obligation, but many people have a minhag to fast on a yurtzeit. to relieve the suffering that the neshama of a parent might be experiencing. So that's one thing that's done. Hareini kaparas mishkavo, mishkavo. The second is, we remember them. How do we remember them? We remember them by doing a number of things. On a yurtzeit, we light a candle to comply with the pasuk in Mishlei, Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, that the neshama is like a candle. And then I came across the following very beautiful thing. In some benchers you see this, that in the benching, in the harachamans, there's a harachaman that many people say. Harachaman hu yivorech es avi mori v'es imi morosi, even though they're no longer here. I'm not sure if anyone has that minhag. I came across it years ago. I'm benching, and all the various harachamans that we say, that harachaman, that bracha, so to say, has to be there. They say that the father of the Darkei Tshuva told his son, the Baal Shem Shlomo, he said, when I'm gone, I need a bracha. Give me a bracha, even though I'm gone. Every time we bench, we give our parent a bracha, our father, our mother, who are no longer here. They need our bracha. Bra Mizake Abba. But I asked myself, and why? What is it about remembering a parent that's so critical? So, Parsha's coming up of Vayeshev. We're all familiar with the Chazal that the moment that Yosef was about to be tempted to do something wrong with Eshes Potifar, that he saw the Diyukno Shel Oviv, and he stopped. So the Pele Yoetz learns out from that Chazal, and he says, Shekol Yemei Chayov, Tihye Diyukno Shel Oviv V'imo Lefonov, Chakuka Lefonov. A person who's lost a parent should live their life as if the image of their father and mother is chakuka, is engraved, like something permanent before them always. They should remember them always. Who was he? What was his legacy? It shouldn't just be some faint memory. As we say, Yaakov Avinu Lomes, David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayom. The father, the mother is still here and influencing. It's important for the child to remember that. And when the child remembers the parent, bra Mizake Abba. And then, of course, we speak about how we are Mizake, our parents, Bidvarim. We come to the Kaddish. We're all familiar with the story of Rabbi Akiva that the Or Zarua brings down, about how Rabbi Akiva was able to teach an illiterate son of a father who was no longer there, and of course his father was a Rasha, and when he says Kaddish, the father is rescued and redeemed. What is the Kaddish, and why is it so important? So let me read you what the Shloh HaKadosh says. HaKaddish hazeh eino tefila sheyispalel beno al ov or al eim lifnei Hashem sheya'aleu misha'ol. That's not what it's about, to raise a deceased parent from Sha'ol, from below. Elo zuchus u'mitzvahu kishebino mikadesh Hashem yisborach birabim v'hakol one amen yehi shmei rabba. Listen to what the Shloh is saying. When we say a Kaddish, it impels and almost pushes the son, the child, to transform his life into a Kiddush Hashem. It challenges the child. You're saying Kaddish. You're being Mekadesh Shem Hashem Barabim. Is your life a Kiddush Hashem because of your parents? And if a child can say that my life is a Kiddush Hashem because of a father and a mother, bra Mizake Abba. This is why, I'm sure as you know, that certain Hasidim, they make a feast on a yurtzeit, that they have a little schnapps. I mean, what's that about? So it's the same idea. People have schnapps. They'll say a bracha. They'll say le'ilui nishmas. And it's the bracha that's being done on the occasion of the yurtzeit that is a Kiddush Hashem, because people will say Amen to that bracha. In other words, the Kaddish, according to the Shloh, is emblematic of a life of Kiddush Hashem. The next area of Ra Mizake Abba Bidvarim is Limud Torah. There's a lot to say about Limud Torah and what Limud Torah can do. So, for example, it's brought down by the poskim. Let me just read you one source that's brought down by the Kav Yosher. Actually, this source that's brought down by the Kav Yosher, I discovered happened to be something that the Arizal quotes, and it goes something like this: V'yimhu ba'al Torah v'roi lo l'chadesh bo eze dovar b'Torah os yesh to'eles godol la'oviv v'imo os habei misameach la'oviv v'imo u'ma'atrin la'oviv v'imo kamo iturim. That every time a child says a devar, not necessarily a devar Torah that he or she heard from a mother or father, just gives Torah, and specifically they speak about it happening on Shabbos. That if a child is mechadesh some dvar Torah on a Shabbos in particular, for various Kabbalistic reasons, it could be any time, he says, "V'oz ma'atrin es oviv bi'itaros bo'olam haba, gorein kivod godol v'nachas ruach li'olam haba." I'm translating the Hebrew translation from the Zohar. So there's a great zechus for children. Children learn Torah bein mizake abba. But in particular, as you know, there's a specific segula for learning Mishnayos, l'zecher a deceased parent. What is that about? So here we have the following chazal that says, they learn it out in the following: May Asher Shemeino Lachmo, Asher, one of the sons of Yaakov, a play on words. Asher sits at the gate of Gehenna and saves one on whose behalf Mishnah is studied. And the play on words is, Mishnah becomes the lechem for the neshama. Shemeina, Mishnah, neshama. Asher Shemeina Lachma. Just switch the letters around. Shemeina, Mishnah, neshama. But what is it about the study? Why Mishnah? Why not Gemara? Why not Shulchan Aruch, Chumash, and Rashi? So, Lefi Aniyos Daiti, I thought of a possible explanation. In Chazal, the Mishnah was the first embodiment of the Masorah. That's when Torah Sheba'al Peh was written down for the first time. The Mishnah then becomes almost representative of the Masorah. It's the prototypic Masorah. It represents the continuity of the Jewish people insofar as Torah is concerned. And so, when we study Mishnah, when a son, a daughter, Ra Mizake Abba, what are they saying? They're declaring that the traditions that I learned from my father and my mother, that Masorah is going to continue through me to my children, to their children, L'olam V'olam. That's why perhaps the study of Mishnah in particular is a special segula in order to understand what Ra Mizake Abba means. Okay, I think we have a number of things that a child ought to do in order to bring merit to the memory of a beloved parent. What about B'maisim? That was B'dvarim. What about B'maisim? So, in B'maisim, there are a number of obvious things that a child can do. The first is tzedakah. And here, the Medrash Tanchuma in Hazinu tells us, why is tzedakah considered such an important thing to do? B'maisim, people give tzedakah. So the Medrash Tanchuma comments on the pasuk, Kaper la'amcha Yisrael asher podiso Hashem. So the Medrash says, Lekach anu noagim lahazkir es hameisim b'yom ha'kippurim v'livsok alehem tzedakah shekein shoninu b'toras kohanim yochol mishemeso lo yoel lahem tzedakah. What good is tzedakah going to do for a person who's no longer around? Talmud lomar asher podisa mikan kishe poskim tzedakah bishvilon. Listen, when you give tzedakah for them, so to say, as it were, to redeem them. Motziin u'malin osam kechetz min hakeshes miyad nase rach v'noki kigedi u'mitarin oso kishosh olai. Could you imagine that when you give tzedakah in memory of a parent, it's like you transform them into a pure, an absolute pure state. So this is the minhag why people give tzedakah on Yom Kippur. And of course, based upon the pasuk that we read at the end of Re'eh, Ish kematnash yado kivirkas Hashem Elokecha loch. So Chazal also learned out the Yomim Tovim as well. The reason we say Yizkor, why do we say Yizkor on the Yomim Tovim? It was only on Yom Kippur. So the Achronim point out and they say, because if you say Yizkor on a Yom Tif, it'll prompt a person to give tzedakah. That's why, at least in my shul, right, they used to have appeals, maybe too many, but they used to have appeals on Yom Tif, on Yom Kippur, and other occasions as well. But be that as it may, tzedakah is certainly one of the things we can do in order for a brah to be mizakeh Abba. And then there's something else. There's more than that, which really gets to basically the core of what brah mizakeh Abba means. This is the Zohar with its Hebrew translation. Da'afal gav shemes mechuyav b'kvodo od yoser mi b'chayim. She'im bein holech b'derech hayosher u'metake masov os vadai mechabid lo'oviv mechabdo ba'olam hazeh neged b'nei adam u'mechabdo ba'olam haba neged HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, if a person, as a result of being the child of this parent, this mother, this father, is metaken his masav, he makes himself into a better, he's inspired by the memory of a parent to make himself into a better person. So he honors his father in life, of course, but even in death. And listen to how the Zohar concludes. This is beautiful. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu chos al oviv ve'imo umo shivam bekisei kivodo. As a result of a child who improves, who grows, whatever metaken means, he does something different to his life. His parents the neshama of his parents are seated, if we understand this, bekisei kivodo, next to the kisei kivodo of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I mean, is there a better way for brah mizakeh Abba? It's an absolutely beautiful idea. Tikon Hamidos. I remember, without mentioning a name, there was a woman in St. Louis who I knew was very makpid on Lashon Hara. Very, very makpid on Lashon. She wouldn't talk Lashon Hara. She would walk out of the room if someone spoke Lashon Hara. She was very, very strict about it. And in the conversation, she would come to this women's class that Betty used to attend as well. And so I once asked, I said, I think it's wonderful, but you're so stark about this. So she said to me as follows. She says, my mother was a wonderful, wonderful person. Wonderful. And she went on to praise her mother for the obvious reason. But when my mother got on the phone, she just loved to gossip and talk Lashon Hara. Maybe it was her only fault, but maybe it was that generation. But she loved to do it. So when she passed away, I asked myself, and I knew it wasn't right, and maybe she knew it wasn't right either. I asked myself, what can I do? So I took it upon myself that as far as I was concerned, I'm not going to impose this on anybody else, but I was going to go beyond what I would have to do when it came to Lashon Hara. And she said she just would not tolerate any Lashon Hara. In this case, the daughter was mizakeh, a mother. It's a beautiful idea when a child can transform their lives and make it different. Listen, just to give you an idea of what things that children have done for their parents. Gedolim used to write Sfarim, and very often they would name the Sefer after their parent. Rabbi Yecheskel Landau, the famous Nod Yehuda, what did he call his parish on some of the Masechtas? Tzlach. Tzion L'Nefesh Chaya, named after his father and his mother. And the Chavos Yoyer, named after his mother, Chava. There are probably many other examples like that. These were just two that I came across. Look, a person could be more medactic in mitzvos. There's a whole range of things that a person can do to make their lives better. Is there a one among us that cannot be better people? Ben adam lachavero, ben adam lamakom. And what happens if the impetus to do that is a parent who is no longer here? Sometimes, and again, Rav Soloveitchik, Meirachok Hashem Nirali, on that pasuk in the Navi, Rav Soloveitchik used to comment, sometimes, when a parent is close by, naturally we take them for granted. We don't realize how special they are, but once they recede, meaning they're gone, and we see them in perspective, then all of a sudden we see them in a different light completely. We appreciate them in death. As much as we love them in life, we appreciate them in death in a way that we just never did in life sometimes. Meirachok Hashem Nirali, this is very often how the Rav explained how when Hashem is a bit distant from us, we long for him. We long for him so much more. Here's how the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch put it. Afal pi, she'amiras hakadosh v'hatfilos mo'ilos laha'avos, mikol makom ein elu ha'ikar, elohu she'habonim yelchu ba'orach mishor, ki bozeh heim nizakim es ha'avos. V'yesh lo la'adam litzavos es bonov l'hachazik be'eza mitzvah, v'im mekayim nechshav lo yoser min hakadosh. That's how the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch sort of sums up. Person should make a tikkun in their life. Then, bracha mizake abba. This explains to me a Gemara, first parak in Rosh Hashanah, that I always found somewhat interesting. No, I'm sorry, this explains some, okay, we'll get to that. But the Rav Soloveitchik, he wrote a number of essays on Avelus, and he often connected Avelus with tshuva. Person is sitting shiva, there's a dimension of tshuva. What is the connection between Avelus and tshuva? So here's how I understood it. This is my own way of understanding it. When a loved one passes away, our lives are shattered. Even if the person was an elderly parent, still, it's a trauma. And we're sitting shiva, and the pieces of our lives are just scattered all over. I don't know what it means. I don't know how to make sense of it. There's too much that I just don't understand. That's perfectly understandable and normal. That's what Avelus is. So picture it this way. Picture our life as a portrait, a puzzle. And then there's an Avelus, and the pieces all of a sudden begin to dissemble. The pieces start separating. There's a certain shattering of our lives. And then after Shiva, we're obligated to get up and put those pieces back together again. But here's the thing. You should never put those pieces back the same way. The Avelus has to generate a change. When the piece is a window of opportunity, not a big window of opportunity, but there's a window of opportunity when everything is in flux, my life is in flux, and I can bring those pieces together again and make the portrait even greater, my own portrait even greater. That's tshuva. That's growth. That's tikkun, predicated on the lives of a departed parent. That's bra mizake abba. There is this concept of bra mizake abba also explains to me an interesting Gemara in the first parak in Rosh Hashanah, and that's what I was alluding to earlier. The Gemara there says, as I'm sure you know, that Sifrei Chaim Umesim, during the Yomim Noraim, Psuchim Lefanecha. I understand why the Sifrei Chaim are opened before Hashem during the Yomim Noraim. After all, we are all going to be judged. But the Sifrei Mesim, what's the purpose of opening up the book of those who are no longer alive? So I thought perhaps one of the explanations might be as follows. I'm sure I read it someplace, but this is how I remember it. It may very well be that the person is no longer alive. But if bara mizake Abba, that means that the behavior of a child in any one of the ways that I explained, either bidvarim or b'maisim, what in effect does that do? It's mizake, the neshama of the mace. So however we understand the existence of the neshama in the olam ha'emes, whatever that means, Ramban in the Torah Sa'adim has a whole discussion about what that may mean. But whatever it means that if a parent's neshama was on a certain level, as a result of all of the things that a child can do, there's an aliyah of the neshama. An aliyah. What does an aliyah mean? That neshama now is closer to Hashem. Closer mitachas kanfei Ashchina. Who is responsible for that? The child, the son, the daughter. I'd like to now discuss one final point, which I think only makes this concept of bara mizake Abba that much more meaningful. I'd like to see if I can unpack the theological mechanics, if I can use that expression, behind it. How does it work? Okay, a child is going to do all these wonderful things, but how does it work? How does the parent get that credit? How was the parent redeemed? And here, I came across one of the most powerful insights I heard in the name of the great Rav Hutner Zatzal. Rav Hutner picks a phrase in the Gemara in Eruvin, which relates to matters dealing with Yerusha. The phrase goes, Yoresh Kuroi Davua. That the child, the Yoresh, is the legs of the father, which means basically in so many words that the child inherits the parent. Here's what Rav Hutner did with that phrase. Bra kiroi davua. And here was his explanation. He says, in Olam Hazeh, people who are alive are called a holech. We're a holech. We walk, we do, we succeed, we move on. In death, a person is an omed. A person doesn't move. The game is over. It stops. There's nothing more he can do. Or is there? Bra kiroi da'aba. Here's how Rav Hutner explained it. The children enable the father to walk, to become a holech, even though they're no longer alive. The children, because of what they do, the mace who basically was stopped, his progress, spiritual, religious progress, was arrested. The child becomes the feet. The child becomes the new feet of the parents. The neshama can begin walking again in the Olam HaEmes. It's a remarkable idea. It's a powerful insight of Rav Hutner. He mentions the Gemara in Yevamos in the 10th parak. V'chiyef shelo la'adam lagor b'shnei olamim. Amar Rav Shimon ben Yochai kol tamid chacham she'omrim dover shmua mipiv ba'olam hazeh sivsosov dovavos ba'kover. What does that mean? Every time a child says something over in the name of a father, the lips of the deceased, ki'ilu, as it were, begin to talk. The person is not alive. But on some level, the neshama is alive, moving, growing. There's an aliyah, right? Bra, not mezake abba. Why? Because bra kiroi da abba. The child becomes the feet of the parent. This explains, by the way, that even if the father never is a Rasha, the son can rescue him from death. There's a Ramban by Terach, where Ramban says, "When the pasuk v'yatot tavo alav osecha b'shalom." So there's a discussion about did Terach do tshuva or not. Rashi says he did tshuva. Ramban says no. Ramban says, I'm quoting Ramban, "Shema yesh lo chelek lo'olam haba Terach b'schus beno Avram." Terach has a schus in olam haba because of Avram. Avram kiroi da abba. Here's what the father of the Shloh, Shezechuyos hu mitzvos sheosin habein achar nisas aviv hu kapara v'nefesh aviv, v'nefesh imo. One final insight. If everything that I'm doing, b'dvarim, b'masim, b'ra mezake abba, and as a result, b'ra kiroid abba, is there any intrinsic benefit for the son or the child? The child is doing everything for the parent. What about the son? So there's a Rashba that discusses this very question, and he says, while the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, b'ra mezake abba, the Gemara says, ein abba mezake b'ra. But the father cannot bring merit to the child. So the Rashba says, why not? What does this mean? And the Rashba gives the following answer, which is discussed, incidentally, by the Torah Tamim, has a discussion on this in Koheles, in his parish in Koheles. And he says that B'ra Mizake Abba refers to the next world. There, it only works one way, B'ra Mizake Abba. But in the next world, there's no Abba Mizake B'ra. But in this world, of course, every parent is mizake his children. Every mother and father brings merit to their child. They rear them. And it's really in that regard, when I want to now segue over to Betty and say some things about her, other than what I said at the beginning, that I was reminded of one of the most beautiful Divrei Torah that the Rav Soloveitchik gave on a Mishnah in Eidius. The Mishnah in Eidius in the second parak comments and says, Hu ya omer, talking about Rabbi Akiva, Av zoche lebein binoi, b'koach, uva'osher, b'chachma, uv'shanim, that a father, mother, bequeath to their children beauty and strength and wealth and wisdom and years. Listen to the last phrase. Uvemispar hadoros lefonav v'hu haketz. Uvemispar hadoros lefonav v'hu haketz. Everyone has something to say about that last phrase. What in the world does it mean? A parent bequeaths to a child the number of generations before v'hu haketz, and that's the end. What does this mean? So the Rav, this is how he interpreted it. He says, what does a parent do? What is the ultimate goal of a parent? They rear their children, they take care of them. But you know what their goal is? To introduce them to Mispar Hadoros Lefonav. Parents' obligation is to introduce a son to Rashi, to a Rabbeinu Tam, right, to a Reb Chaim, to a Tosfos, to the previous generations of Gedolim, to welcome these Gedolim into the house by sitting and learning with them and making sure that they learn. This is Mispar Hadoros Lefonav, to make sure that the child becomes a strong link in the Masorah. That's the ultimate goal of a parent. Mispar Hadoros Lefonav. And if the parent is successful, v'hu haketz, that's how Mashiach is going to come. When parents make sure that after their Mea V'Esrei, they have given their children a sense of what Mispar Hadoros Lefonav, what the great generations of the past have bequeathed to the present. And it's really with that idea that I want to move on to discuss and just talk a little bit about Betty on a personal basis. I've given some thought, truth is a lot of thought, as to how I might frame Betty's remarkable persona. And the well-known phrase of Eishes Chayil immediately came to mind. Because if nothing else, Betty Crampman so embodied and exemplified this celebrated description of a righteous woman. But what exactly does this encomium mean? We, of course, are all familiar with the last parak in Mishlei, which richly portrays the characteristics of a woman of valor. In fact, the Medrash, those who are familiar with Parak Lamed Aleph in Mishlei, the Medrash identifies the Eishes Chayil with all the great women of Tanakh, beginning with Sarah Imenu, and then going to Yael, and going to Batya, going down to the wife of Ovadia Hanovi, everyone is mentioned. All of these are Neshei Chayil. And the Medrash learns it out by parsing the various psukim in the Eshes Chayil that we're all familiar with. But the simple pshat, if you read the beginning, Eshes Chayil is not the beginning of Perek Lamed Aleph. It begins, I think, it begins with Pasuk Yud, but the first 9 psukim are very, very interesting, especially the Rashi there. Because what I discovered was that the person that Shlomo HaMelech is talking about, the simple pshat in Eshes Chayil, was his mother, Bathsheba. What made Bathsheba into an Eshes Chayil? Her gevura, her resolute determination to ensure that Adoniyahu would not wrestle the Malchus from her son Shlomo. She courageously confronts David, impels him to act, which he does, and Shlomo was enthroned. So Bathsheba was not a potted plant, if I may use that metaphor. She stood up, and then Rashi says something. Read the Rashi at the beginning of Perek Lamed Aleph. Rashi quotes a Medrash, remarkable, that when Shlomo HaMelech married Bas Paro, which Farshim say wasn't such a great idea, but she feasted him and sang to him all night, on the wedding night, so much so that he overslept the next morning. The problem was the keys to the Beis HaMikdash were under his pillow. And they couldn't get it. Apparently that was going to be the commemoration of the Beis HaMikdash by his Rishon, and they couldn't get into the Beis HaMikdash. Rashi quotes this. Guess who barges into the room and wakes her son up and rebukes him in language that only a mother can rebuke a son, and yells at him and tells him to get out of bed and get the keys and open up the Beis HaMikdash. It's just an incredible Rashi. Rashi's quoting from the Medrash. She takes him to task for his inattention in matters of Kedusha. Bathsheba acts quickly, fearlessly, to ensure that her son behaves and not strays from the derech hatov hayasha b'nei Elokim v'Adam. This was Bathsheba, the first, not the first, but the Eshes Chayil of Mishlei. But the first one to be called an Eshes Chayil, do you know who the first one in Tanakh to be called an Eshes Chayil? Rus. Boaz, Perek Gimel in Rus. You know the story, right? She goes at night to meet him, to convince him to marry her, which was a courageous act. And he says to her, don't worry, I'll take care of everything. Ki Eshes Chayil at. Boaz calls Rus an Eshes Chayil. Rus, who was born a princess and now a pauper in a strange, hostile land, a widow, she could have remained as such and suffered her fate until her death. But Rus was made of tough stock, modest to a fault, and yet she acts with uncommon gevura. She quickly sizes up the situation, and with an assertive determination, she wants to ensure that her life, her family is redeemed by marrying an old man, Boaz. Boaz already had taken note of her tznius in the fields when she was malaketes, and he saw her kindness, her courage, how she sacrificed for her mother-in-law, Naomi. And in the wake of that strange and fateful night encounter, they marry. And Rus is blessed, as you know, with the descendant, David HaMelech. But to me, Rus introduces another dimension to an Eshes Chayil. Beyond the assertiveness, the aggressiveness, wanting to make things right, Rus was a tsanua. And she taught that one can be courageous, aggressive, and yet not sacrifice this midah of tzniut. Bathsheba and Rus, the two Neshei Chayil mentioned in Tanakh. So how do we define an Eshes Chayil? Ramban in Chumash puts it simply, Zrizut. zeal, an eagerness, an urgency to do what's right, an intentness to do Zurizin Magdimin LeMitzvah, a doggedness that says, I'm not going to rest until this is going to happen, because this is the right thing to do. An Eishes Chayil does not rest until she believes that what ought to be will be, until it's implemented. She's tenacious, alert, and brimming with conviction. She gets things done. This is the Eishes Chayil, Zurizas, it's the language of the Ramban, Zurizas. And so, anyone who knows Betty knows exactly where I'm going with this. If you'll ask me, who was Betty Crampman? My answer is, she was this type of an Eishes Chayil. An Eishes Chayil of the highest order. And let me explain. Betty married Julius Zal and lived in Marshalltown. Not the Ir Va'em B'Yisrael, by any means. But it wasn't for long. Betty was driven by a different calling. She came from a very, very chashuv family. And she knew that she wanted to rear her children in a religious community, to give them a solid education in chinuch and Torah. She wanted to contribute to the tzarchei tzibur of a community. In Marshalltown there was a cheder where the children went. But, and Herbie can speak to this better than me, but a year before Herbie's bar mitzvah, Betty picks up the children. Julia stays in Marshalltown, moves into a small place in what in St. Louis they call the ghetto area. So Herbie could go to the Epstein Hebrew Academy, and the children as well. True, she went back to Marshalltown, but then it was just a matter of time. I don't know the years, before the whole family left Marshalltown. Julius left his job and had to start another job in St. Louis, all for the chinuch of their kids. Now, I can't let this pass without saying just one or two words about Herbie's dad, Julius, very special neshama. Hashem gave him the wisdom of Avraham. Right, Herbie? Kol asher tomara lecha Sarah, shema b'kola. And the truth is, he did. When we paid a shiva call, so Herbie showed us a clip of the dinner. I still haven't forgotten it. Where Julius was honored. He was the president of the Epstein Hebrew Academy. He and Betty was honored, but he was the one that spoke. He had a tremendous sense of humor, for those that remember. And every now and then he'd turn to Betty, Bela, is that right? Or he would always check with her to make sure that everything he was saying, you had to see that dynamic in order to appreciate it. It was just beautiful. It was touching, and everyone knew that it was because of Betty that they were in St. Louis. And Julius, to his credit, listened to her. And he did so proudly. It wasn't like, I have to listen to my wife. He was anxious to listen to her. Once Betty and Julius settled in St. Louis, the destiny of the three children was set. And you see them now. I mean, Herbie, you all know Herbie, Rachel, their 4 children, Kanai grandchildren, Susie, the oldest, Chicago, with her husband, Herbie and Rachel here, Stanley in St. Louis. I mean, I know them. And children who are committed and dedicated, they and their spouses accomplished in their own right because of what their parents did. Their parents' children, are out to guarantee the perpetuation of our sacred Masorah, as we pointed out earlier. And to whom is the credit primarily due? To Betty Crampman, the Eishes Chayil. And I should say, Betty and the family knows Hamevin Yovin. Betty Crampman not only was so concerned and so dedicated to the rearing of her children, but to her grandchildren as well. What the Crampton children saw in growing up in Marshalltown and in St. Louis were parents who were in sync religiously and communally. Another word about Julius, I can't help myself. He loved his wife and was completely, unconditionally devoted to her. That goes without saying, but it was much more than that. He admired and revered her. He followed her lead in all matters of Inyonei Shamayim. Julius simply wouldn't budge without consulting his wife. When it came to giving tzedakah, I have to check with Bela. Anything Julius accepted or wouldn't accept first had to pass the Betty Crampton test. And if she agreed, and when it came to matters of ruchnius and sarchet tzibur, she would always agree, whether it was the academy or whether it was the shul. The word Eishes Chayil, we know, or many of us think, is first mentioned in Mishlei Perek Lamed Aleph. That's not the first place it's mentioned. It's mentioned in Perek Yud Bey's Pasuk Dalet. Eishes Chayil Ateres Bala. Eishes Chayil Ateres Bala. Betty, the Eishes Chayil, was able to crown Julius with a wonderful, wonderful crown. And Julius would be the first to acknowledge that and to praise her for it. And so Betty is an Eishes Chayil. It explains many things. It explains her love for learning and, by the way, the reverence that she had for all Rabbanim. Her unshakable faith and firm convictions. She would not be deterred from doing what was right. Her utter devotion to her husband and family. And maybe again, if I may add, even her cookies. I mean, after all, how could anyone resist Betty's suggestions when those cookies were the reward? I mean, it's just impossible, at least for me. And Betty's Zerizus was marked, as I mentioned by Rus, by a beautiful tznius, which graced her persona with nobility and dignity. I mean, she was as powerful as she was, and as strong as she was. You would never know it. Because when you met her, she was just, I'm happy. Ayeh Sarah Ishtecha, Hineva Oha. Kol Kivuda, Bas Melech Panima. That was Betty. That was the image. That was the woman you saw. But those of us who knew her knew that behind that image was a powerhouse. A powerhouse. So, this was Betty Crampton. I thought of how I could conclude this commemoration of the Shloshim, and with Hanukkah coming up, there's so many ways I could bring this to an end. But I came across the following, I knew the following Gemara that's mentioned in the end of the first parak in Brachos, but with the take of the Alei Shiur. The Alei Shiur quotes this Gemara towards the end of Chelek Beis in dealing with the subject of Bitachon. And the Gemara at the end of the first parak in Brachos Daf Chaf says the following: Amar Rav Papa l'Abaye, Ma'ishana Rishonim demisrachish lehu nisa. How do we explain the fact that in earlier generations there were miracles, open miracles occurred? They were able to generate open miracles. Well, Ma'ishna Anan, what about us? Delo misrachish lo nisa. We don't. This is the generation of the Amorai. If you ever study the Gemara in Tainus in the third parak, you see that miracles happen to the Tanoim day in and day out, that they were able to ask for rain. HaKadosh Baruch Hu granted rain. That was the era of the Tanoim. But the days of Rav Papa already, so these miracles didn't occur. Or they certainly didn't occur with that frequency. And he wants to know, how come? So the Gemara has a lengthy arichos here. Well, could it be because they learned more Torah than us? No. We learned more Torah than them. And the Gemara gives a number of possibilities, rejects them all. And finally, the conclusion of the Gemara there in Brachos is as follows. Amalei, kamoi have kamasre nafshayu akidush Hashem. Because that generation knew what it meant to be Moshe Nefesh for Kiddush Hashem. Anan, lo masrina nafshin akidush Hashem. This is Rav Papa talking. We don't know what it means to be Moshe Nefesh Kiddush Hashem. do we understand that? Most people say, how are you Moshe Nefesh? Martyrdom. So the Alei Shiur says that's not necessarily so. Of course, ultimately, Kiddush Hashem could be martyrdom. But the Alei Shiur says no. The Alei Shiur, Moshe Nefesh means when you do everything in your power to achieve a certain goal, you work hard, you sacrifice, you give up. You're willing to suffer perhaps deprivation. You're willing to plow through despair and frustration and defeat. And you don't give up. That's Moshe Nefesh. And if you know how to be Moshe Nefesh that way, then Yisracheshehu Nisa. That's when miracles happen. That's the story of the Maccabim, the Yehuda Maccabee. They did everything they could. They didn't know there'd be a miracle when they lit the oil. The battle wasn't over yet. They were Moshe did everything they could. And from that passion, there was a nace. They knew what it meant to be Moshe Nefesh HaKiddush Hashem. What I'd like to say to Herbie, to Rachel, to the children who are here, is that Betty Crampton knew what it meant to be Moshe Nefesh. She and her beloved Julius, they understood what it meant to sacrifice, to give up one job, another, move to St. Louis with nothing. They knew difficult times. They did everything in their power. And you know what happened? There was a nace. They began a Crampton dynasty. A dynasty of Torah, of Chesed, of Maaseh Tovim. It was not an accident. Not an accident that we see the wonderful extended Crampton Friedman Mishpacha, what they've done with their children, with their grandchildren, and on and on. All because of the Mesiras Nefesh of a certain woman, a certain Eshes Chayo, and her beloved husband. Tehi Nishmasa Tzerura B'Tzror HaChaim.
I'm going to say a few remarks, and then we'll daven Marv. I want to thank Rabbi Bienefeld for those inspiring and uplifting remarks, and a lot of what I was going to say tonight, he's already said. But before I make the few comments that I wanted to make, I'm just going to read something that my daughter Rivka wrote, and then I'll just make a few comments. And I quote, "When I think of my grandmother, I think of a strong Jewish woman, a true matriarch. Bubbie had clear priorities and values that were transmitted by example through her actions and through her just being the person that she was. She had a vision of what she wanted for her family, and she acted upon that vision. She believed in the importance of religious observance and valued religious growth and scholarship. She believed in the importance of Israel, and she believed in the importance of family, being close to family members, appreciating family, and taking care of family. Bubbie was an idealistic person and a realist at the same time. She would laugh and play, and yet she always had a certain seriousness and wisdom about her that made you know that beneath that, she was always focused on the bigger picture and what was really important in life. She was a loving grandmother who made all of her grandchildren feel important and cherished. These are some of the gifts that I feel she bequeathed to me, and my hope is that I will be able to pass them on to future generations in her memory." Okay, I just want to summarize a few things that I didn't really say during the Shiva, and Rabbi Bienefeld alluded to some of them, but one of the things I wanted to say is that my mother was constantly striving to improve her religiosity. From the time that we first moved to St. Louis when I was in 7th grade until the time when her Alzheimer's started, she was really always moving in the direction of trying to improve her religious foundation and to increase her learning. In the Daf Yomi, we recently learned about women learning Torah, and my mother was one of those women who had within her own self the desire to learn, and it was constantly motivating her to learn more and more. When she was young, she was actually one of the founding members of the Young Israel movement in St. Louis, and of course she had a strong commitment to the Jewish community. As Rabbi Bienefeld said at the end of his talk, when I think of the expression of Kvod Bas Melech Penima, I think of my mother, because she was the very quiet person on the outside, but who was very, very strong on the inside and pushed my father in the direction that she always felt was correct. At the same time, she ensured that we would follow our Jewish educations, but she gave us plenty of latitude, and if you know my sister and my brother, you realize that we're all very different one from the other, and it has a lot to do with the type of parenting that my parents had, where they would certainly try to point us in the right direction, but would give us plenty of latitude to become the people that we could become. She was very proud and loving of her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren, and at the end she had great-great-grandchildren, but she really didn't get to know them. She was very supporting, not only morally and helping us to decide the things that we needed to do, but she was also financially supportive of all of us at the times that we most needed it. I just wanted to say one other thing about my mother that most people don't know. When I was growing up, my mother, some people are very kind to animals and they pick up stray animals and bring them home. Well, my mother used to pick up stray nephews and bring them home. I had two cousins that used to come to us. One came almost every summer and became, from a very wild and uncontrolled young man, a Rav with a great family. And the other one came to us after he was discharged from the Navy and his life was a shambles. And he came to us for several months, and my mother really helped him, at least pushed him in the right direction. What became of him was his own problem, but at least she was there to try to help him as much as she possibly could. And those are some of the thoughts that I have of my mother, a very strong and wonderful person who was always striving to become a better person and striving to make her family better as much as she could. I want to thank everybody for coming this evening and helping give honor to my mother's memory. And I should be a kapara to mishkava, as the rabbi said. And in fact, when I sent out the email, I wrote, hey, kaf mem, and my wife said, nobody's going to know what that means. And I said, well, that's what you're supposed to say. Anyway, that's what it means, hare kaparat mishkava. And her neshama should be tzura b'tzura chaim. Thank you for coming. So without Marv now.